This is Rummy's Corner. There have been quite a few outstanding brotherly duos during the long, rich history of professional boxing. And in the course of heavyweight history, famous examples include the Bear brothers, former heavyweight champion of the world Max Bear, and his brother, a former two-time title challenger, Buddy Bear. Then you have the Spinks brothers. Leon Spinks, who won the undisputed World Heavyweight Championship from Muhammad Ali back in 1978, and his brother Michael, who, after having a dominant reign as undisputed World Light Heavyweight Champion, moved up to beat Larry Holmes in 1985 to win the IBF and Lineal World Heavyweight Championship. That marked the Spinks brothers as the first brotherly duo to win at least a portion of the heavyweight crown, where both Spinks brothers had a rightful claim to the lineage. Then we have the brothers Klitschko, Vitali and Wladimir. When the Klitschkos both turned pro on November 16, 1996, the Klitschko brothers had a dream to one day simultaneously hold every major world title in heavyweight boxing. That goal seemed very far-fetched back in an absolutely stacked heavyweight landscape. The Klitschko brothers debuted exactly 1 week after Evander Real Deal Holyfield scored a big-time upset against Iron Mike Tyson. The following month came the brutal war in the rematch between Riddick Bowe and Andrew Golota. And then the great Lennox Lewis was just beginning to come into his own after he had paired up with the late great Hall of Fame trainer Emanuel Stewart. And there were a lot of other extremely talented heavyweights competing at that time. Michael Moore, David the Tua-Man Tua, Ike Ibeabuchi, Merciless Ray Mercer, and more. At the onset of their fledgling careers, Wladimir was considered to be the more talented brother, having won Olympic gold in 1996. As the two brothers gained valuable professional experience, Wladimir would become the first brother to suffer a major setback. It was December 1998, and Klitschko was dominating the action, winning one round after another in his bout against Ross Purity. But as dominant as Klitschko had been, Ross the Boss proved to be a very durable opponent. And in his quest to impress in his first professional bout in his home country in Ukraine, Wladimir overexerted himself and did not pace himself accordingly. Ross the Boss rallied back late, and he dropped an exhausted Wladimir in round 10. And Vlad bravely battled on, but Klitschko's corner stopped the fight in round 11. In the next and final fight on that card, big brother Vitali stopped Francesco Spinelli in round 1. At this point in time, Vitali was viewed as the better prospect with greater potential, and he continued winning as his younger brother got back on track. In June 1999, Vitali got a big opportunity when he challenged WBO heavyweight titleist Herbie Hyde. At that time, it was not considered a major world title, like the WBA, WBC, and IBF. The WBO, however, wasn't exactly nothing either. It was highly regarded in parts of Europe and elsewhere, and it was beginning to grow into being recognized as a more significant belt. At the very least, it was undoubtedly viewed as the next best thing behind the big three. Vitali made a huge statement that night when he stopped Hyde in round 2 to win the WBO belt. Vitali would go on to make 2 successful title defenses of the WBO belt. And meanwhile, Wladimir had put together a nice winning streak of his own following the setback against Purity. In April 2000, Vitali was slated to make his 3rd defense of the WBO belt against Donovan Razor Ruddock. But Ruddock pulled out, and Chris Bird stepped in on short notice. Vitali was boxing well for the majority of the contest against a slippery and elusive boxer who fought nothing like Razor Ruddock. Bird was proving to be a mighty difficult and tricky customer, but Vitali was winning most of the rounds until he suffered a shoulder injury, which prompted Vitali to retire on his stool at the conclusion of round 9. Vitali Klitschko had suffered a torn rotator cuff, and he was ahead on all of the cards when he decided not to continue. Vitali then had the dreaded quitter label attached to him, which I personally believe was unfair, but his reputation at the time suffered because of it. 3 months later in July, younger brother Wladimir had an impressive victory against Monty Barrett on the undercard of Lennox Lewis defending his world championship against Franz Botha. 3 months after that, in October, Wladimir got the chance to challenge Chris Bird for the very same WBO belt his brother Vitali once held. This provided Wladimir with the opportunity to not only win the WBO belt, but it also afforded him the chance to avenge the loss suffered by his older brother. And avenge his older brother he did. It was a dominant performance from Wladimir, where he thoroughly outboxed and outclassed the talented Chris Bird, dropping him in round 9 and then again in round 11. Bird bravely battled until the final bell, and at the conclusion of 12 one-sided rounds, Wladimir was awarded a lopsided unanimous decision to reclaim the WBO title for the Klitschko family. Revenge of the brother indeed. With that victory, Wladimir was once again viewed as the better Klitschko. Wladimir would win a string of title defenses as Vitali rebounded from his loss. Vitali won another revenge of the brothers scenario when he scored a technical knockout against Purity in December 2001. In total, Wladimir made 5 successful defenses of his WBO belt, including notable victories against merciless Ray Mercer and Jamil Big Time McCline, the latter of which happened in December 2002. This paved the way for what wound up being a wild and unexpected 2003 for the Klitschko brothers. Wladimir's impressive winning streak indicated that Dr. Steelhammer was a force to be reckoned with, and he was viewed as one of the best heavyweights in the world and seen as a future title challenger for Lennox Lewis. But in March 2003, Wladimir suffered a major setback when he was blasted out by Corey Sanders. Wladimir simply couldn't cope with the speed, power, and timing. Sanders was drilling Wladimir with a booming left hand that simply could not miss the mark. And after several knockdowns, Sanders stopped Klitschko in round 2 to become the new WBO champion. Now both Klitschkos had somewhat of a tainted reputation, where many believed Vitali was a quitter who lacked mental fortitude, and many believed that Wladimir lacked the ability to take a good heavyweight punch. At this point in time, the Klitschko Dream was nothing more than a pipe dream. But like a phoenix rising from the ashes, Vitali suddenly found himself in position to redeem the Klitschko name when he got the opportunity to challenge the WBC champion Lennox. Lewis was originally scheduled to face Kirk Johnson, who withdrew because of injury, and Vitali was originally going to face Cedric Boswell on the undercard. But instead, fans were treated to a memorable showdown between Lennox Lewis and Vitali Klitschko. Now, the fact that Wladimir, the one viewed as the better Klitschko, the fact that he was bludgeoned by Corey Sanders so quickly, led many to believe Vitali was doomed against Lennox, especially when combined with Vitali retiring in his corner against Bird. But despite typically doing very well against taller opponents, Lennox was having some difficulty with the way Vitali awkwardly utilized his length, and Vitali was tagging Lewis with some mean leather, often when Lennox thought he was out of range, but Dr. Iron Fist was still at a distance where he could land solidly. It wound up being a scrappy and entertaining affair where Lennox and Vitali were exchanging hard clubbing shots with great regularity, but a cut suffered by Vitali in round 3 ultimately became the story of the fight. Vitali made a very strong account of himself against the champion, but Lewis had inflicted a great deal of damage around Vitali's eyes, and the fight was stopped after round 6. This one will forever be remembered as TKO 6. Despite suffering a loss because of the damaged eye, Vitali was actually ahead on all three scorecards when the fight was stopped at the halfway point. It was one of those situations where, even though he lost, Vitali's reputation improved. A rematch never materialized, and this wound up being the final fight during the long and illustrious career of the great Lennox Lewis. Vitali capitalized on his spirited losing performance in December 2003 when he stopped Kirk Johnson in round 2, which was an official WBC eliminator bout. This guaranteed Vitali another opportunity to challenge for the WBC belt. Meanwhile, Wladimir had paired up with Hall of Fame trainer Emanuel Stewart to help refine his style. Their first fight happened as a team on April 10, 2004, when Wladimir squared off against Layman Brewster for the vacant WBO title, which had been vacated by Corey Sanders. The first bout with Stewart in Wladimir's corner ended in absolute disaster. Despite thoroughly outboxing and outlanding Brewster in the early rounds, Brewster rallied back and the fight was ultimately stopped at the end of round 5. Wladimir's reputation was now in shambles. 2 weeks later, we got the third installment of Revenge of the Brother, where Vitali Klitschko squared off against Corey Sanders for the vacant WBC championship. After a quick scare early on where Sanders had his blend of southpaw speed and power on display, Vitali methodically took care of business, and he wore Sanders down both physically and mentally, and ultimately, the big brother once again avenged his younger brother. Klitschko won by 8th round stoppage, which earned him the WBC belt. With that victory, Vitali became the first Klitschko brother to win a major world title. Vitali defended that title once in December 2004 when he beat Danny Williams. But after a year of inactivity and several failed attempts to face Hasim Rahman that were derailed by injury, Vitali retired from professional boxing, citing his nagging injuries. And with his retirement, the Klitschko Dream was seemingly dead as a doornail. By that point in time, the guidance of the great Emanuel Stewart started paying huge dividends for the younger Klitschko. Wladimir had just scored a career-defining victory against the feared, undefeated power puncher Sam Peter. Wladimir had overcome adversity, rising from the canvas 3 times. And aside from the knockdowns he suffered, Wladimir otherwise outclassed the fearsome power puncher. The Wladimir Emanuel team was beginning to really find its groove, and Wladimir was transforming into a more complete and more efficient prize fighter. Wladimir continued improving under Stewart, and he captured his first major world title in April 2006 when he scored a 7th round stoppage in his rematch with Chris Bird to win the IBF title. 2 years and 4 title defenses later, Wladimir also regained the WBO title when he beat Sultan Ibragimov. And by this point in time, the WBO was indeed recognized as a major world title. Later that year, in October 2008, Big Brother Vitali made a surprising comeback without having a single tune-up fight. Instead, Vitali dove right into the deep end when he challenged WBC heavyweight champion Sam Peter. Given the fact he had been out of action for nearly 4 years, combined with the fact that the reason for his retirement was because of nagging injuries, there were a lot of people who were counting Vitali out. But Dr. Iron Fist put on a masterclass performance against Peter to win the very same WBC title that previously belonged to him. This marked Vitali as a 2-time heavyweight champion. So by the end of 2008, the Klitschko brothers were in possession of 3 out of the 4 major world titles. Seemingly out of nowhere, the Klitschko Dream appeared to become a real possibility, if not an inevitability. Over the next 2.5 years, by July 2011, big brother Vitali had made 6 consecutive defenses of his WBC championship, and younger brother Wladimir had continued making defenses of his unified championship, where his growing total reached 9 consecutive. On July 2nd, 2011, Wladimir squared off against WBA champion David Haye, and this was the fight where the Klitschko Dream would finally be realized. Wladimir defeated Haye by 12-round unanimous decision to capture the WBA Super Duper title. The Klitschko brothers had done it. More than 14 years after the two brothers turned pro, they had fulfilled their brotherly dream of simultaneously holding each and every version of a major heavyweight championship. It was an incredible journey with highs and lows for each brother, but amazingly they accomplished their seemingly impossible goal. And the Klitschko Dream didn't just end there either. No. The two brothers technically reigned as co-heavyweight kings for another 2.5 years, with Vitali's final fight coming in September 2012, when he defeated Manuel Char by 4th-round technical knockout. A month later, Wladimir's trainer Emanuel Stewart had sadly passed away, depriving the boxing world of one of its greatest ambassadors of all time. Dr. Iron Fist officially retired in December 2013, more than a year after he beat Char, so he could focus on his political career, and the WBC belt that twice belonged to him was vacated. Meanwhile, even after losing his mentor who had transformed him into a surgical heavyweight powerhouse, Wladimir would continue to successfully defend his unified IBF WBO WBA championship for several more years before his reign ultimately came to an end when he lost a decision against Tyson Fury in November 2015. Wladimir would have one final fight after this, when he challenged IBF heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua in April 2017, where the vacant WBA belt was also on the line. After getting outboxed over the first 4 rounds, and after being dropped hard in round 5, the aging younger Klitschko exhibited the skills and championship heart that enabled him to become one of the longest reigning heavyweight champions ever. Klitschko was emboldened by the knockdown, and in the very next round he scored a beautiful knockdown of his own. Klitschko's experience took over, and per his trademark, he was boxing effectively in methodical fashion. AJ rallied late and emerged triumphant, but Wladimir put on a brave, admirable performance, giving it his very best. In some ways, Vlad's reputation actually improved following the loss, and the former champion retired with his pride and dignity intact. When all was said and done, Wladimir was one of the longest reigning heavyweight champions during the long, rich history of professional boxing. Wladimir was champion for nearly 10 years, and during that time he made 18 consecutive title defenses. Only the great Joe Louis and Larry Holmes, the Eastern Assassin, had more. So what Wladimir achieved was historically very significant in the big picture. And on the other hand, big brother Vitali was a 2-time WBC heavyweight champion, making a combined 10 defenses during his 2 reigns, including 9 consecutive defenses in his second reign that ended when he retired, which also included 3 defenses over the age of 40, putting him in exclusive company alongside Big George Foreman for heavyweights who made a title defense after the age of 40. As individuals, what each Klitschko achieved was praiseworthy and honorable. But when you look at what they did in a brotherly context, where 2 brothers dominated the entire heavyweight landscape between them, on and off and together, over the course of more than a decade, that's damn impressive stuff. And more impressive still, during that long stretch at the peak of their combined might, neither brother lost many rounds during that stretch. For those who did not live through the Klitschko era, it might be easy to look back and overlook the major setbacks that made the Klitschko Dream look like an unattainable pipe dream. For some who did not experience it, it might almost seem like an inevitability when studying their chapter in heavyweight history. And if you look at two key moments that really enabled them to succeed in achieving their goal, the first and most important victory was probably when Wladimir faced then undefeated Sam Peter for the first time. At that point in time, Vladimir's career was seriously on life support after getting bombarded by the fast-handed southpaw Corey Sanders. And after his first fight with Emanuel Stewart ended in utter disaster against Brewster, very few people believed Wladimir had a bright future in boxing. Even Vladimir's own brother had doubts and was concerned about the prospects of his brother facing the highly regarded Sam Peter. Indeed, aside from Wladimir himself, Emanuel might well have been the only man in boxing who believed Vladimir's inner greatness would manifest itself in such a way that Wladimir would go on to become a dominant, long-reigning champion, exactly as he did. And then the other moment also involved Sam Peter, and this was after Vitali had made his return to the ring after nearly 4 years of inactivity. At that point, Peter was the reigning WBC heavyweight champion, and Vitali was viewed as a shot fighter who was forced to retire because he spent more time battling his injuries than he did battling opponents inside the squared circle. Make no mistake, the odds were stacked against Dr. Iron Fist, and he went in there and put forth an outstanding effort to patiently break Peter down both physically and mentally. Vitali's ability to come back after such a long time away was simply remarkable. Without their respective victories against Peter in those two matchups, I don't think the Klitschko Dream ever comes together, particularly with Wladimir. If he loses that fight against Sam Peter, I think his career would have likely been finished. And even though that was not a title fight, I personally believe that was Vlad's career-defining victory, and the one that paved the way for him to rebound from some earlier career losses and to go on to become a dominant heavyweight champion. With Vitali, his career-defining performance was undoubtedly his strong losing effort against Lennox Lewis. But in terms of his career-defining victories, it's debatable, but I think his win against Peter is right up there with his wins against Corey Sanders and Chris Arreola. But given the inactivity, that performance against Peter was terrific. And the other key player in all of this that I think was integral for the Klitschko Dream to become a reality was Emanuel. That partnership was just one of those legendary boxer-trainer duos that was incredibly special every step of the way, from the preparations to forming a game plan and to being able to execute that game plan with the utmost efficiency and consistency. If Emanuel and Wladimir had never teamed up, where Vladimir's great abundance of skills and talent and athleticism were all fine-tuned by the master trainer, I'm not sure Wladimir goes on to become an all-time great like he did. The only tangible downside to the incredible story that is the Klitschko Dream, the fans may have lost out on something, because for a long stretch, the two best heavyweights in the world were destined to never face each other, and understandably so. But at the end of the day, watching the Klitschko era, where you had these two talented elite boxing brothers dominating the heavyweight landscape, barely losing a round between them along the way, this was truly unique and amazing stuff. And the Klitschko brothers certainly left their unique mark in heavyweight history. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed, and have a wonderful night. This is Rummy's Corner.